And of course, this is David versus Goliath, right? Who here has heard of David and Goliath? Raise your hand. All right, everybody here. Fantastic. This is good. All right, so nobody here has heard of David versus David and Goliath for the first time. นี่มันจะเป็นครั้งที่แรก Okay, ครั้งที่แรก DDD. Okay, then what we will do first is maybe we could read it together. 1 Samuel 17. It's quite a long chapter. Shall I read it for you? And you can follow along in Thai. Is that okay? 1 Samuel 17. It says, Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Socoh, which belongs to Judah. And they camped between Socoh and Ezekah in Ephes Damim. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and camped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array to encounter the Philistines. The Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, while Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. Okay? So, as we are looking at this, it sets the setting. There are two armies, right? Israel is on this side, in the top of a hill, and the Philistines are on this side. Okay? And of course, they want to stay on top of the hill, because if you have higher ground, you can shoot people that are running up at you. Okay? It says this in verse 4. Then a champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was clothed with scale armor which weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. He also had bronze greaves on his legs and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the head of his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron. His shield carrier also walked before him. So if you've never heard of Goliath, as we grew up when we were kids, right? เวลาเด็กๆเขาสอนว่า Goliath เขาเป็นยักษ์เหมือนยักษ์ like ยักษ์ที่ยืนข้างหน้าวัดไทย right? ยักษ์อย่างนั้น right? That we were taught that Goliath was a giant, but he probably wasn't a giant that big. He was probably just a very tall man. And if you ever meet people from Israel or people from Asia, we're a little bit shorter. Okay? And so to them, this most likely he was just a very tall man, a very strong man, right? So we all know that. Goliath was tall and Goliath was strong, and he came out from the army of the Philistines in order to challenge Israel. And this is what he said. And for those of you who have heard this story, please just bear with me, okay? He said this. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel and said to them, Why do you come out to draw up in battle array? Am I not the Philistine and you servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will become your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall become our servants and serve us. Verse 10. Again the Philistine said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Do you guys know what smack talk is? Do you guys ever heard of smack talk? It's like before two fighters fight, เขาชอบพูดกัน right? Like เวลามวยไทยเขาจะลำมวยไทย you know what I mean? แล้วเขาจะบอกว่าโอ้ยเดี๋ยวจะตบหน้าอย่างแรงอะไรอย่างนั้นเดี๋ยวอยู่จะตายอะไรอย่างนั้น They'll say stuff like that, right? I'll give you an example. You know who Kobe Bryant is? You guys never heard of Kobe Bryant? How many here like the Lakers? Anybody here like the Lakers? Okay, 5 people. That's fantastic. All right. So after the Lakers won the championship, right? You win the championship, which is, I know it seems like a long time ago. I know I'm praying too, right? they went to visit the White House, right? To meet President Barack Obama, right? And Barack Obama, after watching Kobe play against Barack Obama's team, which is the Chicago Bulls. Barack Obama is from Chicago, so he likes the Bulls. And their most famous player is Derrick Rose, right? And so after watching Kobe play against Derrick Rose, Barack Obama told Kobe this. He said that, you know, Kobe, Derrick Rose may have his number, right? And they may have your number. And so, so Kobe responded, you know, if he calls that number, I'll be sure to pick up after the 5th ring. That's what he said. Do you get it? Like, because Kobe's got 5 rings and Derrick Rose has none? Okay, just fell on deaf ears. All right. But, you know, the Bible is so great. It has, like, everything. And it even has smack talk. And this right now by Goliath to David is ancient smack talk. It's awesome. He's like, look, I'm a man, and I'm here to represent all these people. Are there any men among you? Step up, let's fight, and if I win, then you serve us, and if we win, you will. If you win, we will serve you. But deep down, Goliath's thinking, there is no way you are going to win. So when he says, I defy the ranks of Israel this day, I want you to understand that Goliath is not only talking smack to the Israelites. เขาไม่ใช่ only พูดไม่ดีกับพวกคน Back then, when armies fight, not only do the men fight, but their God fight as well. That was the belief, right? So when Goliath said, I defy the ranks of Israel today, he is saying, I not only defy you and all of you people where there's no man, but I also defy your God. That's what he was saying. Okay? And that's why in verse 11 it says, when Saul the king and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Verse 12. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. I want you to remember he had 8 sons. Okay? And Jesse was old in the days of Saul, advanced in years among men. The 3 older sons of Jesse had gone after Saul to battle. And the names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, the second to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. Verse 14 says, David was the youngest. Now the 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's flock in Bethlehem. Yes, that same Bethlehem that Jesus was born in. The Philistine came forward morning and evening for 40 days. 40 days. There's that number again, 40, right? It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, right? And here, Goliath, for 40 days he came out talking smack to the Israelites, right? Verse 17, then Jesse said to David his son, take now for your brothers an ephah of this roasted grain and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp of your brothers. Bring also these 10 cuts of cheese to the commander of their 1,000, and look into the welfare of your brothers, and bring back news of them. For Saul and they and all the men of Israel are in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. Okay? So David, as we all know, was a shepherd. And he did not go to war with Saul. He was in charge of what? Water. Y'all ever watched the movie The Water Boy? David was the water boy. He wasn't even a player on the team. He was the guy that brings them water and food. Okay? It says in verse 20, so David arose early in the morning and left the flock with the keeper, and took the supplies and went as Jesse his dad had commanded him. And he came to the circle of the camp while the army was going out in battle array, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up in battle array, army against army. Then David left his baggage in the care of the baggage keeper and ran to the battle line and entered in order to greet his brothers. And as he was talking with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine from Gath named Goliath, was coming up from the army of the Philistines. And he spoke these same words, and David heard them. When all the men of Israel saw the man, they fled from him and were greatly afraid. The men of Israel said about Goliath, in verse 25, have you seen this man who is coming up? Surely he is coming to defy Israel. And it will be that the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. Okay, so army versus army. Goliath has been standing out there for 40 days talking smack to Israel, saying, I defy you. I defy your God. Are there any men among you who will fight me? And even the king of Israel, who is afraid, is saying, look, I will make you rich. I will give you my daughter. And yet nobody is stepping up. Nobody is stepping up to fight this battle. In verse 26, then David spoke to the men who were standing by him, saying, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God? The people answered him in accord with this word, saying, thus it will be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David, and he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you have come down in order to see the battle. So again, David's there asking, is it true what the king says? He will give his daughter and all these riches, and none of you are stepping up to take this on? And of course, David's brother, instead of encouraging him, his brother says, look, I know you're wicked. You just came here to watch the battle. Becauseเขาคิดว่าเขาอยากจะดูคนที่จะถูกฆ่าตาย, right? It's like he thought that they were just going to come watch this battle and watch people fight each other and die. That's why you came, David. But of course we know that's not why David came. It says, when the words which David spoke were heard, they told them to Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Then Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, while he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, and this is a very funny explanation, all right? Saul essentially says to David, look, you can't fight against him. He's been like a warrior since he was a kid. And you're like a shepherd. You can't fight against him. And David responds, says something very funny. He says, your servant was tending to his father's sheep when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock. I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God. So he basically says, look, I killed bears, and that's why I think I can fight this man. Is that a good explanation? That's like saying, I can play in the NBA because I made a couple baskets at my church. That's not true, right? I can make a couple baskets at my church. I know my church. I know my church's basketball court. I know where the cracks are. I shoot from the same place. Of course I can make it. But that doesn't mean I can play in the NBA. But yet that's David's explanation. And you know what? Because nobody else stepped up, Saul took David. And Saul says, then Saul clothed David with his garments. It says, and Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. Then Saul clothed David with his garments, and put a bronze helmet on his head, and he clothed him with his armor. And David girded his sword over his armor, and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. So David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them. And David took them off. He took his stick in his hand, and chose for himself, how many stones? 5 smooth stones. Now many people have said, oh, this is because Goliath had 4 brothers and David was going to get them all. I don't know that to be true. I think he took 5 stones because quite honestly, that was as many as he could carry without his clothes falling down. Okay? And he wasn't sure whether he could hit Goliath with the first one. He didn't know, so he picked up 5 stones. That's what my belief is. If your pastor thinks differently, go ahead and agree with your pastor, not me. Okay? It's okay. It's all right. If we believe in Jesus, we'll all still go to heaven. Both of those doors, if you believe in Jesus and he died for your sins, if you repent, still go to heaven, okay? All right, we can argue for eternity about those 5 stones if you want to, okay? And of course, after he picked up those 5 stones, and his sling, he approached the Philistine. Then the Philistine came and approached David with the shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy with a handsome appearance. David bin kon law, right? And the Philistine said to him, now listen, ancient smack talk at its finest, all right? This is smack talk, like 2 fighters before Jamboy, right? They're talking. This is what the Philistine said. The Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? He's basically saying this kid's like a stick. Get out of here, all right? Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine also said to David, now listen to ancient smack talk. Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field. All right, that's what he says. Come to me. I'll kill you, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field. That's smack talk right there, right? But listen to what David said. David had God, so he had godly smack talk. Listen. Then David said to the Philippines, not the Philippines, the Philistines, excuse me, not the Philippines, please. Philippines have had enough. We got to help them. I'm talking about the Philistines. It says, you come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the Lord that we believe in. That's, Jehovah Sabaoth, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day, the Lord will deliver you up into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you. That is some smack talk right there. Goliath says, I'm going to take off your skin and feed it to the birds and the beasts. David said, I'm going to take your head. Right? And then what does he say? He doesn't stop there. He says, and I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Let me read this for you. Goliath says to David, I'm going to take your skin off and feed it to the birds and the beasts. David says, I'm going to chop your head off, and I'm going to take the bodies of not just you, but your entire army, and I'm going to feed them to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the earth. Ancient smack talk, you see? It's beautiful. It's beautiful, right? That all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that God does not deliver by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give you into my hands. Testify. That's not just smack talk. That's a sermon. A lot shorter than mine. And then we all know what happens next, right? Goliath brought a sword. David brought a gun. What wins if you take out a sword versus a gun? Well, you tell me. อะไรแข็งแรงมากกว่าปืนหรือดาบปืนสมมุติว่าใครมาพยายาม rob you out here, right? And เขาเอามีมีดเอาดาบมา hey, I'm gonna take your money. And you meet Boone, right? What are you going to do? You're going to say, oh, your knife is so scary. I'm running away, take my money. No, you're going to take out a gun and you're going to say, you need to go away. You need to go away, right? Of course, you good Christian people don't carry guns. I know that. Please don't bring guns to church, okay? All right, this isn't 50 years ago. This is today. Please check your guns at the door, okay? It's okay. We have Jesus, right? But of course, Goliath brought a sword. David brought a gun, right? Essentially, ancient gun. He went out there with the spiritual gift of sling rock throwing, and he hit David. He hit Goliath right in the head. He didn't hit himself. That would be wrong. He hit Goliath right in the head, right? And Goliath fell. And what did David do? He chopped off his head. Yeah. He chopped off his head. And David won the day. Y'all know that story? It's a good story. Y'all ever read it like that? Yeah. Probably never. You probably never paid attention to the ancient smack talk. Isn't it good when you see something familiar? That's why the Bible's so good and you can read it so many times. Because you always find something new. Right? And when I read this, I was like, oh, this is good. I've got to share it. Because God's word is good and you got to share it. Now let me ask you this. As we read that story, number one, what types of things did David possess, do you think, that made God choose him? Out of all of the army of Israel, why did God choose him? Was it because he was the oldest? No, in verse 13 and 14, if you want to highlight it, it says it wasn't the oldest. In fact, in verse 13 and 14, it says that there were 8 sons, and the 3 older sons of Jesse had gone to battle, and David stayed home. In fact, David was the youngest, which is usually the oldest will do things. They are the oldest. We have those traditions in the Thai culture as well, right? Was it because he was a schooled soldier, like they had been training him since he was a boy? No. In verse 33, it says that Saul didn't want to let him go